Hello and welcome to the Guitar Hang Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Stankorb. Today I have an absolute legend of a guitar player with me, Joel Hoekstra. Joel's brought his incredible chops, energy, and showmanship to some of the biggest stages in rock, playing with bands like Night Ranger, Whitesnake, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and Broadway's Rock of Ages. Today we're diving into it all. His early days, his influences, his approach to tone and technique, and his work ethic. What it's like playing with bands like David Coverdale and Whitesnake, or touring with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and of course his solo projects. This one's packed with great stories, killer insights, and plenty of guitar talk, so stick around. Welcome to the Guitar Hang Podcast and Joel Hoekstra. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So, where are you in this great world? What?
I'm back home in New York City right now.
Okay, gotcha. And did a tour or a project just wrap up for you?
I just came back from 3 in a row with Broadway's Rock of Ages band.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've just had finished the Monsters of Rock cruise. Excuse me, I'm still kind of working something out of my throat here today. But the Monsters of Rock cruise, and then had a couple days in there, and then went off and did these 3 in a row with them. And now I'm kind of headed into a lot of sessions. You know, in addition to right before the cruise, I finished. Let's see, what was happening there? I finished tracking the guitars for my album.
Okay.
So that's kind of bigger news, I guess. And prior to that, I did a rock camp in LA. And earlier this year, I did SNL 50 with Cher, the homecoming concert. And it's been a lot of Rock of Ages band gigs so far, more or less. But I've got a lot of recording stuff coming up. Like today, I'm going to play on something for my friends in Accept. Just do like a little solo for them and have 2 sessions waiting, and gonna send some riffs to potentially co-write with some people. And so yeah, I've got a busy day ahead.
That's awesome. Yeah, the Monsters of Rock cruise seem really cool because, you know, everybody typically goes off and does their tours, but to be able to see each other on a boat and get to interact with not only your colleagues but fans and that kind of thing is seems like a very special type of thing, although a bit compacted, I would think, you know, since it's fairly short time out on the sea.
Yeah, I've done so many of them now. I think I counted, and it was my 13th.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm kind of just settled into like the norm there. The more complicating things have been the last couple times I've done it. My set on there is an acoustic set. It's called the Hangover Jam.
Yeah.
And so basically it has a story of evolution, why it happened in the first place. But basically I start with like fingerstyle acoustic, like super mellow. And then I bring up a drummer and a bass player, and I usually sing a couple tunes. And then I bring up like guest singers, and like this year it was my friend Brandon Gibbs and Danny Vaughn from Taiketo, and usually just play some cool covers that they like, maybe sometimes some of my original stuff. But the nature of it is that it's free Bloody Marys for everybody during the course of the set, and because it's a morning thing, and I've chosen that.
Right.
And so, yeah, I kind of get everybody going with some free drinks, and I give away stuff between every song. So, I guess I can tell the basic story. I was on with Night Ranger the first year, and I basically, back in those days, I still was drinking, and I was hungover and went up on deck, and I just had my acoustic. And I guess I was naive enough to thought I could just go up on deck and just do a little practicing, get some sun. And they ended up like plugging me in while John Corabi was renewing wedding vows. And so I was playing this fingerstyle acoustic stuff. And Larry Moran, who runs the cruise, is a friend of mine. Night Ranger was passing the second year, saying like, we don't want to do it 2 years in a row. And he was like, I want you on the boat. And I said, well, I don't know what you want me to do. I sing a bit, but I don't know about a whole set of me singing and playing acoustic. It's maybe a little out of my wheelhouse, especially for something fairly high profile. And he said, well, why don't you do that stuff you were doing, during I'm like, you want me to play like easy listening fingerstyle acoustic on like a metal cruise? Is that what you're saying? And he's like, I just want you on the boat. And I was like, okay. So I thought, if I'm going to go do that, I better, number one, get everybody drunk.
Yeah.
Uh, Number two, for free. And number two, give away stuff. So between songs, we have, can I swear on your program?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we have between songs, it's free shit, right? And so it's become this whole thing. And like literally, when I end a song on that set, people chant free shit, free shit, free shit. And I give away stuff and I've even had companies sponsoring it. It's gotten so big. I mean, the first one of these I did was so like off the radar. I think there was probably 20 people there. And now when I go do them, it's like, 600 people, 700 people. And so it's kind of like, it's turned into a bigger event on the boat. Everybody's kind of caught on. And so anyway, they're great fun. I have a good time. It's just kind of like waking up in the morning and going up on deck and playing some fingerstyle acoustic, and then playing, try to make it a little less 80s. I try and hit like a little more on like 70s stuff. Like, we play Bob Seger and Tom Petty and, that kind of stuff. So it's not so, straight up the gut, like 80s cruise stuff. But songs that I like, like everything has to be something that I like in there. But I've had some great guest singers over the years. I mean, I've done it with Russell Allen singing, Dino Jalusic singing. I've had a lot of guest singers come up for a song or two, like Todd La Torre from Queensryche. Kip Winger's come up and sang with me on it. So Brad Gillis has come up and joined me on guitar on it once. They're just good fun.
Yeah. That sounds like a perfect thing because, after a night of staying up, rocking out, and you're a bit hungover, to have something cool like that, and also a fun thing, kind of ramping you up into the next day. That's a great premise. That's really cool.
I kind of derailed myself with my rambling. My point is that I go on with an acoustic, and the last 2 years I've been invited to get up with people on electric that feel kind of important, too important to just grab some rental guitar. 2 years ago, Joe Satriani asked me to get up and play with him. And so I end up going down there with my Les Paul in a flight case, fingers crossed kind of thing, going like, please God, like get it there safely. And then this year, Michael Schenker wanted me to get up with him because I guested on his new album.
Yeah.
So each of those felt important enough to be like with my main guitar. I'd be like, you know what? I don't want to end up playing some guitar with action off the neck or 9-gauge strings on it or something crazy. I play 11s myself.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I think they're great in that regard. Like that wouldn't really happen anywhere else. As long as you're on the cruise, people look at it like, hey, you're on board and you just played on my album, like coming from Michael Schenker's perspective and going, why don't you come up and play that song with us? Okay, great. And so a lot of great opportunities come out of it. And in general, it's just nice to see everybody. Even, one of the people I really hadn't known that well, but I really enjoys playing a lot is Jared James Nichols. And, we saw each other and the catering area, and he's just a super nice guy, really super cool guy, and we had a great chat. And I said, well, I'll come down and watch your set today before my set and head off and sound check and whatnot. So I stopped down, and then the next day we judged this So You Think You Can Shred contest together, which is an amateur competition. Anybody who's a cruiser can get up there, and I don't know how long they play exactly, like a minute and a half or something like that. And then we have to give them a 1 through 10, and it's very comedy based. We're supposed to keep it, witty and light. But anyway, did that as well this year, in addition to the Michael Schenker thing. And then Brandon Gibbs and I, who we've been doing our acoustic duo gigs now for quite some time, like maybe they started really slow about 10 years ago or something like that. And the last few years preceding this year were quite a bit. We started gigging a lot, even touring Europe and touring the UK a couple times, stuff that we didn't really see coming. We were just kind of doing it to because we get along. Like, right. Hey, you want to book a gig and go do this? And, it's funny when you don't have a crew and you don't have a band.
Right.
it doesn't take much to like come out of having a gig make financial sense and have a good time with like a friend of yours and play music that you like. So anyway, we had a set of our own as well on the boat. So I was pretty active.
Yeah. Is it a challenge to set up your year as far as how you're going to, I mean, obviously with the TSO, that kind of occupies that latter part of the year. So you've kind of got that as a pillar over here, but the rest of is it a challenge to get everything shoehorned in as far as Rock of Ages or, you know, other?
It is. I mean, so luckily the way the Rock of Ages band is different than Rock of Ages. Like that was the show that I was a part of here in New York City on off Broadway and Broadway. And that cumulatively was a little over 6 years.
Yeah.
And that was 8 shows a week. So it was a lot. Like I probably now the nice thing about a Broadway gig is that you can sub it out. Like it's your gig, it's union protected. No one can go in and, talk in somebody's ear and get your gig. So basically that allowed me to tour with Night Ranger during that time. And then Trans-Siberian Orchestra was even added during that time. So every November, December, I'd go, okay, bye. I'm gone for 2 months. So they run very much the same way. It's somebody who's licensed the name and the logo, but essentially it's us just being a cover band. Like we take the band from the gig from that Broadway show, and we just go out and play the full-length versions of the songs. And that's just fun, when you work with people for over 6 years and you're all friends. And then for me, I play all the solos. I have an actual solo in the show. And it's not like one of these 80s bands where you got to camp it up and get in like lime green spandex and look like a fool up there. I mean, I guess it's all relative what looks like a fool, but I get to dress like I normally would dress on a gig and get introduced more or less to having my resume read, like, he's from Whitesnake and plays with Cher, et cetera, things like that. So, yeah, I have a good time doing them, and they just feel really chill. It's just like going to play a cover gig.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. I think a lot of your fans might be interested in, I try to do a bit of homework. So watching interviews, so I'm not asking you the same questions and not asking a lot of string gauges or type of fuzz pedals. I don't want to get too much in the minutia, but I think there's an interest in the evolution of how you became where you are today. Growing up in Chicago, I always think that location or geography and climate has a lot to do with the things that happen to. I grew up in Cincinnati in the Midwest. You grew up in Chicago. So there's a lot of time spent indoors listening to music, playing music, practicing, and that kind of stuff. So a little bit of that information on coming up for you,
Yeah. I mean, I basically had classical musicians for parents, and they started me on cello and piano very early. Like, and I was not into it. I was a little boy. I was like, I just want to be a baseball pitcher, and then I was 11 and I saw Angus Young when MTV was just starting up, and heard Back in Black came out. And that was it for me. That was my Beatles moment. Everybody talks about the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. Well, seeing Angus Young was like my moment where I was like, I want to play guitar. I want to be that guy. That guy's cool. I didn't realize I was going to grow to be about a foot taller than he is, and really not play a whole heck of a lot like Angus Young at the end of the day either. But it was like his energy and his stage presence that just made me go like, that guy is just so cool. So I basically just, fell in love with rock guitar like right away. I mean, there was almost like the last career decision I had to make in a lot of ways. I picked that up at 11, asked my parents for a guitar. Luckily got a teacher who taught me rock songs, which back in the Stone Ages, when I was that age, that wasn't that easy. It was done with, this is even really before tab became the norm. Like, so we would cover a little bit of the Mel Bay book, like, okay, let's do 10 minutes of the Mel Bay book, learning how to read. And now I'm going to teach you a rock song. But the way he did that was cassette rewind kind of thing. And he would show you, okay, here's how that goes. But then if I didn't remember it, like strictly from memory, I was sunk. So, I mean, I remember getting out of those lessons and waiting for my mom to pick me up and practicing the song, like frenetically, being like, please, like stay in my mind. So I don't, I don't forget this and wouldn't have wasted my money. And So the early years were very much spent doing that. And then I joined a band at probably, I think I was 15 and started doing some all ages shows. And we had a great local scene. There was a lot of talent. That scene came out of there. You know, the Disturbed guys all came out of there. I was friends with Dan Donegan back in the day in that scene. And Greg Saran, who's like the guitarist for American Idol nowadays and plays with, you know, everybody under the sun. He's like the go-to guy. He came out of that scene. Tyler Bates came out of that scene. He was a little older than I was, but he's, you know, Marilyn Manson. And so we had a lot of people kind of come out of our little local suburban scene. And we were not like, I was not in a well-to-do area at all. I mean, we were, because my parents are classical musicians, it was an interesting dynamic. We grew up very like highbrow in a very like blue collar neighborhood. Like our neighbors were all electricians and plumbers. And, you know, it was like a very kind of blue collar scene that I grew up around. So very working class, which I think leads to like a lot of the reason I approach guitar that way. Just working really hard and like going after everything and just like, hey, you never know what's going to take off and what's going to do well. And that's just always been my approach. And I guess in a lot of ways, I deemed any of this like whole like rock star thing as like unrealistic, even myself, much less what my neighbors might have thought. I'm sure they would have gone like, yeah, lots of luck, you know, you're not going to do anything coming out of where we live. But I view it like frosting on the cake, man. All I really wanted to be was a professional guitar player. That's it, which I still maintain is the hardest thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody that's ever like, you know, been able to make their living as a guitar player, like, or as a musician, period, like I tip my cap and salute you. It's like, it's not easy, you know? And then from there, it's kind of the only difference is size of audience and maybe like, you know, the quality of the gig. And, you know, that can almost be detrimental at a point when you're riding a real high, then to be able to deal with some of the lows. It's like when the roller coaster gets to that point where, you know, you're treated special and then you're dirt, and you're treated special and then you're dirt. It's almost harder to do than just kind of like ride through like I'm doing my gigs. And so early on, you know, I floated through a lot of that, gigging around the Chicago area, teaching. I went to GIT when I was 19, went to LA, did that. Then I just started, you know, teaching 70 students a week in the Chicago area and gigging on weekends in bars, doing that whole thing. And then ended up playing with Kathy Richardson in her band there, who's a really talented singer. She sings with Jefferson Starship these days. And she had a big following locally. So that was kind of like my first big like local break. And then being in her band, that caught the attention of Jim Peterick from Survivor, who also was a local guy. Like he lived in our area. And Jim was just parting ways with them and starting this thing called World Stage, where he wanted to have a show like once a year, basically, where he would invite all his friends up to sing their hits and he would have a house band. And so I cracked my way into that house band. And so there I was locally in Chicago getting the chance to play with like, you know, Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon, Rick Emmett from Triumph, Alan Parsons, Don Barnes from 38 Special. And one of those people that you would pretty much be there every year was Kelly Kagi, the drummer from Night Ranger. Yeah. And so I'd see Kelly once a year. And so simultaneously, Kathy ended up getting this role. Kathy Richardson got a role as Janis Joplin in a show called Love Janis, theater piece about Janis Joplin. And long story, but I ended up becoming the guitarist for the New York run. Yeah. So she had thrown my name in, like, you know, saying, you know, he can go and blah, blah, blah. Made the band for that. So made the move to New York to do a show that in Chicago only ran like 2 months or something like that. And I thought, well, I just told my students at the time, I'll see you in a couple months. Right. It ended up running like 2 years out here. And by the time it ended, I kind of felt like I was moved in out here in New York, where I still reside. I mean, now it's 24 years later when I thought it was going to be 2-3 months. And in that time, Jim Peterick would still have me back to do those gigs. So I'd fly back once a year to go do the house band gig. And that led to the opportunity with Night Ranger. Right. So Kelly, basically Reb Beach was doing it in the interim between Jeff Watson and myself.
Yeah.
and needed to miss a show, and that ended up being my audition. Kelly was like, "Hey, I know this guy that plays with Jim Peterick, man. He gets off the plane and he knows 36 songs, and we won't even have to rehearse with this guy. He does the 8 finger technique."
Yeah.
And so that became my in and Night Ranger. And kind of it's such a long story, dude, but I'm getting older. I've had it's been a long go at it. I have a neighbor who's a pit guitarist, like plays in legit like pit band stuff out here. And he asked me if I'd be interested in subbing, and I mainly did it just to brush up on my reading skills and I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll try it. And so I learned these 300-page scores. I subbed from on The Boy from Oz, on La Cage aux Folles, and the third show I subbed from on was Tarzan, and that turned out to be the Magic Charm. The keyboard player on that gig ended up becoming the music supervisor for Rock of Ages.
Right.
And so he went, when it came time to hire the band, he went, I know this rock guy that comes in and subs, like, and he'd be great for it. And by that time I joined Night Ranger. And so it was like, hey, this is great. Night Ranger's song is in the show. So next thing I know, I had this Night Ranger and Rock of Ages.
Right.
And then Alex Skolnick wanted to take a year off in TSO, and they needed somebody. And I luckily had, both of those credits kind of working in my favor, and got, the standard 2 auditions, one with Al Petrelli, the music director, and one with Paul O'Neill, the owner, founder, the late great Paul O'Neill. We lost him several years ago, but got hired for that. And that was stressful because I was like, well, now I got to sub out Night Ranger. So when you're asking about shoehorning things, it's no problem to sub out a Rock of Ages for Night Ranger. That's easy. But going to the Night Ranger guys and going, guys, there's going to be 2 months a year. But to their credit, they were cool about it. And we did that. It worked that way for about 4 or 5 years with those guys. And then the opportunity came up with Whitesnake. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to, I guess, break out a little bit more internationally, play with some guys like David Coverdale, Tommy Aldridge, Reb Beach. I mean, really kind of, very, very talented guys, amazing catalog of music. I mean, I love the Whitesnake catalog. It's incredible. And so that opportunity arose from just kind of the early bird gets the worm. I was really the first person knocking at the door going, can I audition? Can I audition? And David liked me. I mean, we hit it off, and I got the gig really early. Unfortunately, that meant my departure from Night Ranger. But it did lead to me going, okay, I'm in Whitesnake and I've got this Rock of Ages show in Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Right.
Great. And then David needed to have knee surgery done one year and told us we're going to not tour this year. I reached out to people if anybody needs a fill in, and Justin Derrico, my friend who plays a Pink and on The Voice, was speaking to his co-guitarist on The Voice who played with Cher, Dave Barry. Dave was saying, I need a sub for Cher this year. And Justin was like, well, what about Joel Hoekstra from Whitesnake? I know that sounds kind of weird, but he understands how to play down a gig and play, not shit all over it and all this stuff. And so that's what led to Cher. And so, I mean, that's the general rundown of things. It's so long. I'm so sorry, but that's...
No, it's perfect. I think the narrative or the through line through this is that if you are to encounter fans inevitably that are asking you, Joel, how in my area, I've amassed a little bit of a following, whether it be on social media or clubbing and gigging and that sort of thing. What's the path to get to where you are? The thing is, it's going to be a million little things and a bunch of different gigs, and every gig is going to be unique. But the thing is, you got to come in and deliver for 20 people or 20,000 people. You have to read the room when you come into a band thing to listen a lot, speak about half as much as there's a lot of things that add up to that. There's no way that you could have calculated your trajectory from Angus Young to where you are now, and all those things. And you had to accept a lot of gigs and say, maybe I can't do this, but I'm going to figure out a way to work hard and get my reading chops better, get this better, get my whatever it might be. And it's a hard thing because there's no being discovered, really, even with the internet.
and factor into that pretty much like right when I got out of GIT was when it became like, do not play guitar solos ever, or you'll never play a gig.
Right.
Right. So like as soon as I became a pro, that was like the initiation, right? It was like, oh, by the way, playing like solos, that's not cool at all.
Right.
So that left out of there was like, some of the stuff I did in the oldies scene, because like when I did Love Janis, the music director was in Big Brother and the Holding Company, and he would pull me out. My friend Sam Andrew, who also has left us these days, but Sam would bring me in to be the second guitarist on gigs that were regional. They kind of had several guys that would do it, but if there were gigs in the Northeast, I was like the second guy with Big Brother and the Holding Company playing. And also one of my subs on Love Janis played for the Turtles, and
yeah.
he had me into sub. So there I was playing Happy together with the Turtles, and then he was coming back from what he was subbed out from, but their bass player said simultaneously, I've had enough of doing this. Like, I'm done. And so they liked me, and they said, do you play bass? And I said, well, I do now, because I needed a kick, So I ended up doing, I think, about maybe 2-3 years of bass with the Turtles, which is really bizarre for people to think about. It's not at all the normal story of like, the guys who actually did break it in the 80s before it all died. Like, it's amazing how different the story becomes.
Oh yeah.
It's like I'm very much, I guess, like the working class guy who like, just always went after everything hard, and kind of found his way to stuff that I guess I never figured I'd get. But it's really cool to be there and have the opportunity for sure. But I think I wear it like a badge of honor that I get even mentioned in some of the discussions about like, the current guitarist without being a guy who has an album that sold millions of copies. That's never happened for me. Like, there's no like, oh, I don't want to cite examples, but I'm talking about like guitarists from the 80s who, when they were 23 years old, were on an album that sold like 2 million copies, and forever they're just kind of famous. So for me, it's just kind of been like a steady stream of work, and always go after stuff and see where it takes me. And being really open-minded. I've also done stuff like played in acid jazz bands and hip hop bands, and just kind of gone after everything. So there's a side of me that is exactly where I belong, playing the hard rock 80s stuff, because that's what I initially fell in love with and wanted to do. And then there's a side of me that's like almost like a session guy, because I'm happy just playing guitar.
Right.
I studied classical guitar. I've also done like straight ahead jazz, like duo gigs and stuff like that with friends, where we'll just read out of the real book and play jazz. And so I've had a lot of different experiences with music that probably the standard guy in like a hair band, I hate using the term, but like would have had. So just very much like a professional guitar player who found, I guess, what you would call elements of rock stardom. I don't want to be like rock star, but, but there are some that would describe it that way by like having some of the gigs I've had, or, it depends, right? In a way you could say yes to that, and in a way you could say no to that, because certainly I'm not like a household name. It's not like I walk down the street and people start screaming that, hey, there's Joel Hoekstra. But like, I also do get recognized by people, and in certain environments, you do feel like, oh, I guess I'm kind of well known, like people actually know who the heck I am. So
Yeah, the variety of being the spice of life, to have so many different things and so many different, and it's kind of like you're building the road as you're going, and you're not sure exactly where it's going to take you, but that's the excitement of it. What new thing is going to come up as a result of all these great associations that I've had, varied associations. I think it would be a tough thing if you just did 30 or 40 years of a certain genre.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if your tastes are eclectic, or, I mean, you started in classical music and you have interest in jazz and other things. So I think it's a perfect journey, man, course for your life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to play with a lot of people, and that were my heroes, and live a lot of really cool dreams. And I just kind of continue to do that, but also just remain open-minded musically, to any opportunity. Now there's a couple reasons for that. I mean, like number one, it's like for some reason nobody ever wants to like say it. Maybe because they want to just like appear like they're the multiple Ferrari owning, mansion owning guy. But like we all need to make a living, you know? So like, yeah, I want to make some money with my guitar, like, which is probably the reason I'm teaching like 27, 28 students a week right now virtually. I enjoy teaching. That kind of came back for me in COVID.
Yeah.
It re-entered my life. It went away for like 20 years, but in addition to that, doing the sessions and just recording guest solos for people, I want to be able to make money from those things, but I also find that they make me a better player.
Yeah.
And that's important for me. Like I need motivation to be on my guitar every day of my life. And I'm pretty much on it. Like I'd say a good like 6 to 8 hours a day, every day. Now, is all of it spent playing technically as fast as I can, like the content creators? No, absolutely not. Like a lot of it is taught, like teaching theory to people or teaching them how to play rhythm guitar, but it forces you to examine things about your playing. And I always cite the ultimate model with that, like as far as still wanting to improve and still get better, is Jeff Beck, right? Like, I mean, Jeff Beck just went like this until he passed.
Yeah.
Right. There was no like, oh, he's not playing so great.
Right.
He just
Kept
like,
getting.
that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to go out being like, well, he was doing his best work at whatever age I die at, and he was playing his best all the way to the end and kind of giving it all. I'd rather not just like turn into the guy where, well, he sounds pretty rusty these days, So anyway, that's it to be a better guitar player and to make a living.
Yeah.
And none of us, by the way, these days, I mean, the majority of the people I know, there are some exceptions, but most of the people I know are in my boat. Like they just don't want to talk about it for some reason. Like it's like some kind of, I don't know, maybe they want to be perceived as like, the super successful rock star. It's like, okay, cool. But I live in New York City. It's expensive as hell to live here.
Right.
So in terms of what I go through to pay my bills and everything like that is like, okay, I have to work hard with guitar.
Yeah.
But anyway, doing my albums, that's important from me from a perspective of like, and it's going to sound self-important, but like legacy, like when your body of work, when you're done, I want it to be more than like, this guy had some good gigs, like I want to leave behind my own music. So I have 3 instrumental albums that I put out, and then 3 under this Joel Hoekstra's 13 moniker, which is basically like my rock side project. And this one that I'm working on right now will be the 4th. So I think generating your own material and still finding an artistic outlet amidst all the work is really important. Like to still find a way to like pick up the guitar and find yourself as an artist in there is important as well.
Because those recordings are like a little photograph in time of where you were at the moment that you're making that. And you look back over your body of work and you can kind of see the chronology of how you're evolving as a player. And it's nice to, like you say, to have a legacy or a body of work that says, here's what I created, here's what I had to offer. You had mentioned about the content creators, and I have a lot of students right now that ask me about making a career in music, and of course that always panics their parents because they're just like, please, not a career in playing guitar. But on one hand, they see stories of folks that are making great money as content creators. But my thing to them, and I've cited you as an example a couple times, I said the key to this is working ridiculously hard, but also being able to be diverse and not assume that you're going to stay one straight path to this. Like, I'm going to be Pat Metheny and I'm going to play jazz and I'm going to, you may do 20 different things inside of that may be your main passion, but just to make a living, there's so many different things. And I think with content creators, I'm hoping that a lot of those guys have an opportunity to get out and play with other folks, because as somebody that does create content stuff for online lessons and things, it is a very lonely thing because you're just playing things. I also
Yeah.
performed with the Pink Floyd tribute group for the last 16 years, and that's a great bit of fun to go out and do those shows. So it's
Mhm.
it's really important to have an outlet or a wide variety of outlets. And I don't know if kids are younger students these days, for which there don't seem to be as many as there were. But for the ones that are there, I think they miss the thing of just getting out and playing with as many people as you can.
I think there's an element of that that's almost comparable to like having all the vocal television shows like, American Idol and The Voice, where the person that wins tends to be like the sensationalistic, fantastic high note guy. And that's the way guitar has kind of evolved. And it's great you mentioned Pink Floyd, because I always cite David Gilmour as the example. It's like, well, it's awesome. Everything's very sensationalistic. Like when you watch everybody online with all the incredible chops, and it's like, or the people that have worked out solo pieces where they're drumming and looping and playing every part to a song. It's like, okay, it's incredible, no question. I'm glad that people are doing it, just like I'm glad people are doing the vocal shows. I'm glad that there's some musical culture. It just is that we're missing the middle, where there's like the player like David Gilmour, who's obviously an incredible player, but there's like zero sensationalism.
Right.
It's just taste. David Gilmour is great because he's David Gilmour, and every note he plays is perfect, and everything he plays is like the most tasteful thing you've ever heard in your life, and his tone is incredible. And so I suppose, yeah, I mean, if you want to be the get off my lawn guy a bit, that's like that's the thing that I miss. But I like to keep my toes in the water with that scene. Like, I do some of those shred collaborations here and there. And I think it's cool that they'll let a guy like me, who's maybe a little bit older than all of them, still hop in and do that here and there. And I have respect for all of them. Anybody who's put in the time to be able to play guitar like that, you put in some serious hours, and it takes a lot of dedication, and they certainly deserve respect. But that being said, I think just being a pro, period, is like, that's where it is. And there's no question it's evolved, and I guess whatever it takes. I just tell people, like, look, just try to remain open-minded. And yeah, it's like you said, people run into problems sometimes when they get too specific about how they want their path to be. And it's like, well, your path is not going to be that easy. It's not, you can't just say, I want to be in this band and do this. It's like, you're going to run into obstacles where you go, oh crap. And you've got to kind of find your way around it, or you get a day job. And then what usually happens to people that take the day job is, oh, it's just going to be part-time to support me doing this. The day job ends up kind of consuming them, because plan B always inevitably is 1,000 times easier than plan A.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as you open that plan B, it's like everything starts working out great over there. And the next thing you know, your life is that, and plan A becomes, it shrinks. And so I definitely saw a lot of my friends when we were all young. We all wanted to be the, guitar players. I definitely watched the window shut on the majority of them.
Yeah.
Where that went away and plan B became the thing. So.
Yeah, that plan B is a wicked thing, because it's alluring. It's like, well, at least I've got this thing to fall back into, and then, but yeah,
it does work out for some people though. Like, like when I mentioned Dan Donegan earlier, from Disturbed, and he basically was working construction while Disturbed was happening. Like, he wasn't one of these guys going, I'm just going to make my living with guitar. I'm a totally different animal. My whole thing, like I said, was I think I'll be happy as long as I'm doing this.
Right.
So for better or for worse, I went about it that way. And for him, he was one of the lucky guys where plan B went away and plan A exploded, and he got, Disturbed is huge and doing great. I'm so happy for Dan. He's a great guy. But I've seen more people fail with that plan than just kind of going like, I'm just going to be a guitar player and see where it takes me. But I don't know that I went into it for like fame. I went into it because I loved playing guitar. That's like, I think you almost need it. You have to have a hole in your head to go into it, to think I'm going into it for the money, because like money would happen way easier doing virtually anything else. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like you need to work a lot harder at music to make that occur than just like the standard, I'm going to go get my college degree and go into business or something. And then you kind of work your way up the ladder in whatever field you're in. And it's a much more, I guess, conventional way to go about living your life.
Yeah.
So I no regrets. I'm glad I made it this far. It hasn't always been easy. It's not always what it's cracked up to be. But then again, like there's times where it's more than you ever thought it would be, and you're like, I can't believe that I get the opportunity to do the things that I get to do. So I just try to remain grateful, but always kind of remember that, hey, don't lose sight of the work ethic, because that's what created it all. And try to minimize this stuff. Don't buy into the you're great, you're amazing, you're blah, 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 all that stuff. It's like, look, I'm right where I am with guitar, and like we all are where we are with it. And you just try to like tune that out. And then that way you're able to tune out the guy that chimes in online and says, this guy sucks. Like he's got, no business being in having his gigs and this and that, and just go like, okay, there's your thing. And I mean, whatever, man, I just try to, as much as possible, just kind of go like, okay, every day, just be productive, wake up every day, work hard, be productive, do the best I can. And wherever that takes me, then cool. And, sometimes I'm disappointed. Sometimes I'm like, gosh, I can't believe I've done this much. I have both sides to me. I don't know how you feel about it, but there's times where it's like, oh, I wish I had, maybe if I had done this, things would have worked out better, or, just like anybody else, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very human thing. We all think that, and then it resets in a very unexplained way when somebody comes to see a show and says, man, that was special. Whether they come to you and say, I saw you with Whitesnake, or I saw you with TSO, and man, it really inspired me to maybe continue playing or push through, or if they hear your story. I think guitar chooses us. I don't remember a time that I chose guitar. I just felt I have to do this. And it was, I didn't really ask advice, because I knew that I just have to not have a plan. I just have to go forward, and for better or for worse, as long as I'm playing guitar, that's the payoff. And obviously it helps to make money, but you have to find somewhat of your lane. And it seems like you have many lanes that you're comfortable traversing in, like down the highway. And that's a beautiful thing, to be able to move between things, but still maintain an artistic vision and that good old Midwestern work ethic that we both, and there's something very to that. We are told from very early, do not take a compliment, because taking a compliment is tantamount to bragging. There's a very Midwestern thing. I don't know if you experienced that, but I grew up with that. And it's
Sure.
And the other thing was, look around, and if this guy's working that hard, work
Harder.
2% harder, or 10%, whatever it might be. But always keep your eyes out and just keep.
It's exactly my advice to people, man. That's anytime I get the, what would you tell a young musician, is just make sure you're outworking everybody else. Look around and see how hard they're working, and then just make sure that you're working harder.
Yeah.
I do believe you get back what you put into it.
Yeah.
Suppose there's exceptions to all these things, but the majority of the time, right? Like, you put yourself in a position to succeed or fail. Like the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? That kind of mentality. Now you could have that mentality and walk down the street today and have a truck smack you and make one of your arms inoperable. And then of course, everything I'm saying is complete BS, right? So like, I mean, there is an element to life controlling our lives as well, like, things that are bigger than us. But in many ways, I think we actually create our own realities, our own destinies. I think the majority of it, that's true. It's not 100%, but the majority of it is created by your actions or inactions. And whatever decisions you make kind of have cumulatively formed whatever existence you're in and whatever reality. So
yeah, the thing I love about what you just said, and about your story is when you would show up at auditions, however those auditions came about, it was obvious to people. It's like, holy shit, he needed to learn 4 songs, but he learned 36, and he knew all the words, and he knew all the arrangements of tunes. So it's like you create this thing of they can't not hire me. I've got the right personality. I'm over prepared. I'm perhaps in some ways maybe overqualified for the gig, but it doesn't matter. And when people, especially the legacy bands and artists see that kind of thing, like, wow, you would go to that length to get this, and having a winning personality and having referrals. But it seems to me like what you're describing is you just know that you have the gig, even if for some extenuating circumstance that door closed because maybe somebody like David had an injury or whatever.
Mm.
If it was an extenuating circumstance, that's fine. But you had the gig based on your work ethic and your preparation. So when you showed up, you knew.
To be honest, I always feel like most of the time in my head that I'm not going to get it. And it's like, I feel like it's driven more out of like feeling like I'm not good enough, and like working to the point where I'm like, it's not good enough. And then I'll go to whatever given situation I've prepared for and realize I put in like 20 times more work than anybody else who's there, and go like, oh my God, okay, So, but I had a lot of confidence when I was younger. I guess they call that the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? It's like the more you actually learn about what it is you do, the worse you realize you are at it, right? So like the older I've gotten, the more I realize like it's really pointless. I mean, this isn't sports anyway, Yeah. So I was just try to take it from a perspective of being friendly with other guitarists who are like, proficient, great players, because we've all just had a life experience. At this stage of the game, for me, it's about like just being the best version of me I can be. It's too late for me to go, I want to be this guy. I don't like, that's not even remotely in my head anymore. It's like, it's only what I'm doing with music on a daily basis and being a pro. And then whatever those experiences are, make me whatever level of player I am. And I just kind of take it like, well, gee, I do put a lot of time in. Yeah. So I go like, okay, I also recognize the fact that some guys are putting in that much time only on what their vision of them being an artist is, and going, well, I guess they're sitting here and I'm sitting here, doing some of the stuff I'm doing, but whatever. I definitely work really hard, and think I have a pretty realistic understanding of where my skill level sits and all that good stuff, and understand that sometimes, maybe qualified, understand sometimes like not qualified, but whatever, man. Like the main thing is like just to be like cool with everybody along the way. And maybe when I was young, if there was somebody that was good, it was, the cat with the fur going up and, that kind of thing. And nowadays I'm like, I'm just over that kind of thing. I'd rather like befriend that person and be like, that's so cool, and give them their props and form a friendship, and then take it from there. Because the bottom line is, if they're at that point, they've put in an awful lot of time and they deserve your respect, not your I guess I don't know, like disdain for being great. Like,
how dare you?
I hate you because you're great. How dare you be great? Yeah.
A buddy of mine who's a great guitar luthier is a huge fan of yours, and he said, oh my God, you're going to talk to Joel. Ask him, with TSO, is there, how far in advance do you know the tunes that you're going to be working on? And is there built-in sections of the show improvisationally within the solo spots, even solos within or is everything
So, well, as far as to answer the when you get the songs, you get that a song list about a month before rehearsals, something like that. And that list is longer than what you're going to play by probably, I'd say, about 10 songs.
Yeah.
So you get a fairly substantial song list. And then as far as what makes the show, like they just kind of like to have a look at everything on the main stage and see with lights, and then management and the music directors and the O'Neill family kind of debate about these things. And John Oliva is involved in that. And then certain things make the show and certain things don't. That's really they're the people who make that decision. And it's kind of nice not to be involved in that, like a band where you'd be part of that, just let them sort it out and tell you what to play. As far as improvising goes, I could Al Petrelli does quite a bit on the West, but Al is the music director. So I think, he doesn't, for me, I feel like it's a little bit more of a performance gig. Most people are seeing the show one time, like play the best version of that solo that you can play. That being said, like there were a couple this year where I decided like, no matter what, every time I'm going to improvise that solo. Yeah. And just kind of force myself out of my comfort zone. But I don't do as much of it as Al Petrelli. Like I kind of worry that like, well, what happens if it sucks? And then I'm not the music director. And like if I go to improvise some solo, and nowadays that lives on YouTube forever. And, you could be the next, Nick Jonas reel where he played that solo on that TV show or something. It's just a crazy example, but I just don't want that. I don't want to like ever just botch something or play something really bad and I'd be like, why did I improvise that? I could just play a safe solo to that. And but I think TSO is very much a performance gig. I think more than anything, it's really about the production. I like to bring out a lot of guitars that are fun to look at. It's very visual. And I think, seeing as people are paying their hard-earned money, there's a large part of me goes, just play it down. Like play what you know of the show. So you're playing, you're not going to just do it for yourself. A lot of times the improv, you have to wonder if it's coming from a place of, is this making it better for the audience, or is it only making it better for us who are sick of hearing my solo 50 times?
Yeah.
Right. I actually don't know the answer to that. Like maybe there's some genuine like greatness. You can hear the spontaneity and maybe you can't. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah, you're too close to it, perhaps, But
yeah, you have no idea. Like, I don't know if that was better or not. Like, but
the with the Pink Floyd show that we do, we're kind of on the grid because we've got a click track. The computer's controlling the lights. Every song has a film, a full length film, and so all the special effects, all the spoken word stuff. So what the audience, if the audience had any perception of what we're hearing in our ears versus it's very much a production in the way that there's not room really to work out your Scott Henderson licks on a Pink Floyd gig. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we could never change the form. Like there would be no, oh, he's really going, let's keep playing. Like we're
right. Yeah.
TSO is now we don't play the track at all. Sometimes this freaks people out when they hear it. So disclaimer, like there are no tracks with TSO. Like everything you're hearing is live off the deck. But that being said, we're playing a time code that drives the light show, drives the films, just exactly what you're talking about. So same deal with TSO. It's very visual. So you're never going to change the form. The only question would be like, okay, I've got a 16 bar solo. Do I wing it or do I play the same 16 bar solo I've been playing the last 40 shows or whatever when you go into it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's great to do those big performance things, but then it's great to do a jazz gig in your neighborhood or Rock of Ages. So yeah, to me, I agree with the mentality of having a variety of different things is.
I mean, the best thing is like, Brandon Gibbs and I, when we're just the two of us on those acoustic duo gigs, man, I mean, sometimes we're playing for like 75 people.
Yeah.
And so gone from playing for 10,000 people, whatever, last year doing the festivals with Accept, you're playing for 80,000 people and you can't say hi to anybody.
Yeah.
Once you open the door, then there's, but on something like that with Brandon, you got 75 people there. Well, you can say hi and take a picture with all 75 of them. And,
Right. Yeah.
so there's something cool about that. And then it's also kind of cool because the people that tend to go to those are the people that have seen you at the bigger things and they actually started following what you're doing
Yeah.
as a musician. And so they become fans of yours, not necessarily Trans-Siberian or only Trans-Siberian Orchestra or only Whitesnake. They actually start following you a bit.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to be able to connect to those people because those are the people that have taken some of their time and given a shit, basically, about
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah. It's very meaningful for you. And it's also, it's also helpful to have a group of followers that really are into what you do because they resonate with your music. That's whether it doesn't even matter the numbers, but the fact that there are people that are out there following what you do is very special.
Yeah,
Rather,
absolutely. And I appreciate all of that. I mean, it's crazy. I have some people that post about me every single day online. It's like incredible to me that I'm like, I can't believe number one, that I'm interesting enough for them to like dedicate the time to be like, I'm going to generate a post about this guy today. Well, like I said, all that stuff, all that, fame stuff, it's cool. It's awesome. I'm not going to say like I didn't like want it in a way. I just didn't ever think that any of that would be a reality for me. And that's the bottom line. I just didn't think,
yeah,
it just seemed like not, man, we're probably a very similar places that we're from. Where I was from was a very southwest suburb. This was not supposed to happen.
yeah.
It's not like dad was an entertainment lawyer in LA and was going to put me in with the right people to make a career happen for me. Right. I mean,
Yeah. I grew up in the Rust Belt. They call that Ohio, Pennsylvania, parts of Michigan, and growing up in all the shows that I wanted to see that always missed Cincinnati were always going to Cleveland, or LA. And my wife grew up in LA, so she got to see all these amazing shows. But you never think it, and it's a little bit oppressive, when you're living there. You think everybody around you is becoming got an auto mechanic or electrician, plumber, construction. You just feel like, man, that's just my lot in life. That maybe
yeah.
that's what I'm supposed to do, but the guitar chooses you, and you just have to figure a way to make it happen. It's you really can't have a plan B. You just
Well,
have
I think my parents being musicians and not doing well financially, I think probably wanted me to do something else because they were like, it's a tough life. And so I think, one of the best things they did for me was they told me, all right, so I did 2 years of like community college classical guitar, right?
yeah,
And got my associates essentially. And then it was like, now I'm going to go to GIT and then I'm going to be done with school because it's not going to matter. So nobody ever gets a gig in music because of what degree they have. Like, I just want us to be a guitar player. And they were like very clear with me. And they were like, look, when you're done with GIT, if you're not going to get like a college degree, like a meaningful one, because an associate's doesn't really land anybody anywhere.
yeah,
But they were like, if you're not going to do that, like that is the last money you will ever see from us. Like, you're just, so we're clear. Like, if you're going to do that for a living, like you're not getting like a dime from us kind of thing. And that was one of the best things they could have done for me.
oh yeah,
I mean, they really just cut the cord and made me go like, okay, if you're going to do it, you need to learn how to work hard enough to make it happen.
yeah,
And, hence me building up that roster of 70 students and gig, because I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to just gig on weekends and live off that.
yeah,
At that time, I was probably making $100 a gig or something like that. And I'm like, I can't live on $200 a week.
yeah,
I have to like figure out a way to, do this. So teaching really saved my ass in the beginning, built to help me build a career. And then it saved my ass during COVID when everything got shut down. And I went, well, let me put up a social media post and see if I can do some like virtual teaching. And all of a sudden it was like, I just got like a gazillion replies. And I taught 31 people a week, strange number, but 31 people a week during COVID. during the time where there was no gigs, and then everybody was recording. So I did lots of guest solos, and I did some of those collab videos. I started doing cameos. There was a lot of learned lessons from that. And then I realized that when things did restart, I was like, okay, so there's probably some things I don't want to let go of, like this virtual teaching thing. Yeah, I still have a weekly schedule, but when I do go out with, say, TSO, what I do is I tell them, okay, the weekly schedule is null and void from this date to this date. What I'm going to be doing is sending open offers of times to you guys and reply if you want to sign up.
Yeah.
So that's from what I call sign up lessons. And then they hit me up with an email, and I, will put them in any given time slot. And so even with TSO, I'll gig, the 8 shows, typically Wednesday through Sunday. I get Monday and Tuesday off out there. I'll still go I can teach three, 4 a day and go like, okay, like why wouldn't I do that? And then it's really helpful because when you're playing one set of music for 2 months and your fingers are just going through the same stuff for 2 months, that kind of becomes like all you play.
Sure.
And so it's kind of, I'm so sorry. It's kind of neat to, number one, not talk about the tour. When you're out on a tour, everybody that's what you're out with, that's all you talk about is the tour. So it's great to talk about guitar.
Yeah.
It's great to run your fingers through hey, let's work on A flat melodic minor right now or something like that. And play something that's completely different than you're doing. Kind of remind yourself oh, I'm a guitar player who's doing it right now. I'm not the tour, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I find it really helpful. Helps me really, actually, it betters my mind. I don't just sit around and spin and think about the tour the whole time. It kind of reconnects me to the guitar. So blah, blah. Sorry if I'm being long-winded.
No, not at all. Those are the things that on tours you've got to have. I was talking to Andy Timmons about this, and he said every tour cycle, he has kind of like his safe zone where he puts on the headphones, and he's got one tour it was all Chet Baker, one tour it was maybe it was George Harrison. It was a vast thing, but he just kind of got him away from thinking about talking about the tour, and just a way to just kind of decompress. Or whether it's teaching or listening, you got to find ways, because the road is not what the fans think that it might be. They just see that evening of, oh my gosh, or they see the tour dates, all the TSO tour dates, and go, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I want to do that. And
I always try to, I think the multiple thing in general, the multiple gigs thing, that's been helpful. Because, if you've got something else, you've got something to take your mind off of the one thing. And if there's always something else waiting, it kind of keeps you focused on what it really is, which is this, right? So just playing guitar for a living. And so, yeah, I think just doing one thing, you can tend to spin a little bit too much about that thing. And, I try to tell people, it's look, no matter what gig you have, I don't care what it is, there's always going to be something good about it, and there's always going to be something bad about it.
Yeah.
So are we going to spend the time talking about what's bad about it, or are we going to spend the time talking about what's good about it? Because you can drive yourself insane if every gig you do, you talk about what's bad about it. And it's become there truly is no answer to being happy playing music. You kind of need to program yourself to go okay, I'm going to talk about what's good about this particular thing and what's fun about it, or that makes me happy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You've been incredibly gracious and generous with your time, man. Thank you so much. We probably went over a bit, so.
Hey, no worries, man. I'm sorry. I'm kind of long-winded, especially with that story of my career, because that's just brutal.
No, I think that's a very for as many people that love to hear you play and what you're playing and coming up with. It's also fascinating because it's kind of like a Rocky Balboa kind of story. It's
100%, dude. It's an underdog story for sure.
It's not like your parents were Hollywood directors and you grew up in and you started hanging out with all these. Not to denigrate anybody that did that, but this is a different story. And from one Midwesterner to another, it's I love those stories of people that musicians that against adversity did.
Yeah.
Really well. So
Yeah. Well, right back at you, man. Tip my cap to you being out there doing it as a pro. I think that's what it's all about.
yeah.
So
Thank you so much, Joel.
okay. Thank you. Have a good day, okay?
All right, man. See you soon.
All right, man. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Guitar Hang podcast. What an awesome conversation with Joel Hoekstra. Can't thank Joel enough for sharing his journey, his classical roots, discovering AC/DC, and making his way to the big stage with Night Ranger, Whitesnake, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and beyond. His story is a real testament to what happens when talent meets passion and hard work. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in, and thanks for being part of the Guitar Hang podcast community. If you dug this episode, please do us a favor, like, share, and subscribe whenever listening or watching. It helps us bring you in-depth conversations with some of the greatest guitar players on the planet. Make sure to follow Joel on social media and check out his latest projects. He's always got something amazing in the works. If you haven't already, connect with us online for more interviews. We're talking about behind-the-scenes stories from the world's best players, conversations with noteworthy guitar players from around the world. That's it for today. Until next time, keep playing, keep creating, and we'll see you in the